let's talk about sex. Yeah, I did say that. I did say sex. Let's talk about sex. I want you to think about 3 things what sex means to you. Just 3 things. I promise I won't make it uncomfortable, I won't drag anybody up on a stage, I won't do any experiments or anything. I just want you to think about 3 things what sex means to you. Then I'm going to share with you what I think what sex means to me. Sex means, for me, means love. It means intimacy, and it means fun. Now, I hope you're brave enough here to either nod or raise your arm, but how many thought about love when I said, what does sex mean to you? Okay, raise your hand, yeah? Thank you for your participation, okay? How many thought about intimacy? Yeah? How many thought about fun? Thank you. My point here is that sex is something which is across generations. It's across national borders. It's something that we share with the new generation. But I can tell you, from up here, we don't agree. We haven't got the same understanding of what sex means to us. So, if we haven't got the same understanding, how can we then accept or expect when we meet the new generation, when we tell them, it's important here when you come to work for us, teamwork, loyalty, honesty, solidarity, respect, success, recognition. Are we making a fundamentally mistake that we actually take for granted that we know that we think they understand what we talk about? And that's my whole point about this presentation, is that the starting point has to be that question, do we have the same understanding? Now, where is our knowledge coming from, working with the new generation? Well, it's true, I did start as a military pilot, but for the last 5 years I've been working with pilots, individual pilots. I've been working with flying schools, operators, government, because this is coming. The new generation is coming, and we need to have a plan. The new generation of pilots, you can call them the me generation, the millenniums, the generation Z, they're different. There's always been the clash between old and young, but the new generation has been born and raised in an environment where it makes them special. They think different. So what I'm going to do today is just try and share some of the experience that we have done over the last couple of years. I'm not going to talk about how doom and gloom the new generation are. I'm going to talk about solutions. I'm going to give you some inspiration of how maybe to attract, how to retain, and how to manage the new generation. So, just to give an example here of where there might be a clash between generations. Just give you a brief moment to look up at the slide. I think anybody operating an airline training environment can recognize this, because here's the situation. New pilot comes, 7 o'clock in the morning, reports for line training. Okay, he's there sharp 7 o'clock. The training captain has been there since 6:30, wondering where's this new guy coming? Because his expectation is that you report 30 minutes before. Nobody has taught the new pilot. The next conflict is when the new pilot says to the captain, tell me what I need to know. The older generation has perhaps a perception of, well, you need to be worthy for me to actually train, you need to have a bit of a different attitude, you need to have studied before. And that's why we maybe have the conflict. Now, what we do know is that when there's conflicts in a work environment, it can affect safety, it can affect efficiency, and it can affect teamwork. So that's why we should really focus on making sure that there's not these conflicts in our workforce. Now, I promised to talk about the new generation, Generation Z, and I have to apologize, I am generalizing, but that's necessary to put things down on the slide here. So, Generation Z, in order to solve the problem, you need to understand the problem. So, up here are some of the values and some of the preferences that we found for the new generation, Generation Z. It's a generation where they would like to have recognition for everything, from everyone. If they put something up on social media, they like likes. Likes gives them success. The social life is done on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. In fact, I've been told the other day that Facebook is for old people, so maybe it's more Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat, or even Snapchat is dying, so maybe more Instagram. Whenever they do something at a workplace, it has to be fun. It has to be carpe diem 100%. Why settle for anything less than perfect? And it's also a generation where they think, well, what if something better comes up? What's in it for me? When it comes to be led at a workplace, it's a generation that would like to be led one-to-one, and whatever they do has to be meaningful. So, the challenges that we found that can come at a workplace is the new generation are actually quite mentally weak. Low self-esteem. And the reason, I think, why they're mentally weak is because there's my little darling, my little princess syndrome. They've been told, born and raised by their parents, how good they are. That's why we see a generation that end up on national stage and X Factor, actually thinking they can sing like Celine Dion, when they're, to be honest, they're crap, they can't sing. But nobody has been given them honest feedback. Until they maybe start at a workplace where you start assessing them and telling them that there's actually quite a few things you're not good at. And then the world breaks down. What we've been trying to do with great success, actually, is we have found a link between how Olympians use mental training and the new generation. Now, both an Olympian and a new generation pilot will think, I'm the best. That's how they're thinking. And when things don't go right, the Olympian has got mental tools, mental techniques to pick themselves up again. And that's what we're actually trying to do with the new generation. We're starting to use mental training with great success because they need tools to actually cope with the fact when they get told they're not the best, they're not good at something. Then it's very important that you give them the tools to actually be mentally strong. The next problem we found that typically is found at work is attitude. It's a generation that has been raised and expecting Amazon one-day deliveries. Everything is accessible just with a swipe. So, having done pilot recruitment, I've been really surprised by a new candidate asking me, when can I expect my command? But this is a product, I think, of the way that the new generation has been fed with all kinds of digital accessories, how they've been raised and everything. So we need to understand it's not because they are deliberately being arrogant, it's just the way they have been raised. Loyalty is a big problem with the new generation, with pilots, generation generals, shopping around. We found that loyalty only exists if there's no better alternative. And that's quite difficult to work with. One-to-one GPS management is also something we found can be really frustrating for an employer. By one-to-one GPS management, I mean, if you tell the new person that starts at work, do this, they will go over here, they will do this, and then they'll stop until they get the next direction. So the way to solve this is to be very, very specific when you manage the new generation. Now, this is very interesting, I think, because how do you then attract them? And I'm going to talk about sex again. Because the model that we found is social, easy transition, and X factor. The reason why we come up with sex is because we want you to be able to remember this. So this, if you want to attract the new generation, let's say you have an airline in a part of the world that is perhaps not naturally attractive, what you need to do first is that you need to make it clear for this new person coming to join your airline, what kind of social life can I get? What's my roster like? What's my time off going to be like? What social life can I expect? Where's the local CrossFit center? The next thing you need to do is you need to make the transition easy. How do I get there? Again, it's a generation that has been helped by the parents. They've been driven to school, they've done everything. So if you ask them to move to a different country, it's perhaps quite a big task. So you can really do yourself a favor is as an employer, you have somebody to support them finding a place to stay, how to get there. Salary is of course important, but it's more about, can I run my economy? Can I get my latte? Can I see my friends? And then you need to try and present the job, the role, in a way where you focus on X factor. What's Instagrammable? Is it a fun adventure? What's in it for me in terms of career development? So, what we call this way of recruiting is Aviation Tinder. This picture here is a pilot called Jacob, and I'm going to tell you a little story. We were approached by an operator operating out of a small group of islands east of Australia. They needed ATR pilots to work out of these small islands, and they needed them to be loyal for at least 12 months. So with that in mind, we went back and we thought, okay, let's try and use the sex model on this one. So we focused on what kind of social life were these pilots going to get. We prepared them for where were they going to live. We told them exactly what the taxation was going to be like in the country they were moving to. We sold the whole adventure as something they can put on Instagram, something they can look back on. They have so many years in aviation. Why is it that they're not flying turboprops? The result was that they stayed loyal. They stayed for the 12 months, and actually, when the operator needed them to stay another 3 months, they did it. I think, had that airline, had that operator gone for the traditional way of recruiting pilots, which is typically attitude, skills and knowledge, I don't think they would have had pilots that would have stayed for the 12 months. So, my inspiration to you guys is that try when you have the new generation, when you try and attract them, try and think about what actually motivates them, because it's very, very expensive to have a workforce that shifts around all the time. You want to retain your pilots. You don't want to spend a fortune on recruitment days where only 2 out of 10 take the job, even though they're good enough. But you can easily end up with that if the new generation can't really see what kind of social life can I get, what kind of easy transition is there, and the X factor. So my question to you, the new generation is coming, Generation Z, the millenniums. Do you have a plan? Are you ready? So there's a little bit of a checklist for your team. Be ready for GPS management. Be very, very specific. What do you expect of the new person to come into your airline? For your job advert, think about sex. Think about the social easy transition, the X factor. And when you recruit, just consider the Aviation Tinder. I hope that you've had some inspiration. There's certainly a challenge out there to tackle. And I think as an industry, it's really, really important that we don't end up with a generation of pilots, a generation of aviators that they think that they're God's gift to flying. Because if we end up with that, we've really got a big problem in our hands, because that is not a good pilot aviation profile. Thank you very much.